Welcome to Discover Part 1. My name is Shane Holsgrove. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sure most of you do, but I'm the lead pastor here at Grace Life Ministries. And the aim of this webinar is for us to explore the foundational topics of the Bible and Christianity. To help you discover truth that you can build your life on, and also that truth that you can share with others to help them build their lives on. Okay, some of the topics may not be too important to you. Maybe you've been a Christian for a long time. Maybe you feel like this isn't relevant, or that's not relevant, or maybe you'll feel like it's not exciting enough, or what have you. But I want to encourage you just to be patient, because even if there's something uninteresting or elementary for you, it's what I'm sharing with you is things that a lot of people have been asking. And so these are the kind of things that we want to share with others who are seeking, who are wanting to know more about God, and who are wanting to be established in the faith. We must never assume that people know what we know. Okay, so this is, and what I want you to know is that how I'm sharing with you, with the notes that you get, the notes that you make, you'll be able to take the truths here and hopefully share it with other people. That's how we know that truth is established in us, is when we're able to share it with others in a way that's meaningful for them. You need to know before we get going that this is by no means an exhaustive nor a fully comprehensive webinar. I'm probably only going to touch on certain topics and issues, and you're going to have to go and dig deeper. And if you look in the right places, you're going to find good answers. It's also important for me to share that I'm not an expert on all of these things, but I'm doing what anyone else would do in a situation like mine. I'm sharing with you what I've studied out, what I've discovered, and what has impacted me. As you should know by now, during this webinar, we'll make use of the Q&A button, which you can find at the bottom of your screen if you have a question, and I'm going to try and answer them live. We will deal with the relevant questions first, and if you have an irrelevant question, I might just put it on the shelf for a future session together. And so please feel free to ask the questions that you want to ask. Especially if they are on topic, the Bible or Christianity. Okay, so getting straight into it, we are in session 1 of part 1. And here we go. So I've got some slides that will come up for you as well. This is the first part of the webinar, part 1. And in this part 1, we're going to be exploring the reason or evidence for faith. Okay, we're looking at this because a lot of people don't know why they should believe. So now we're going to help them to believe. Most of us, I believe, in this webinar would have grown up accepting the things that were taught to us as true. A lot of you grew up in church. And you kind of just heard the teachings about Abraham, you heard the teaching about Jesus, you heard about his life, and many of us just accepted these things. And if we've interacted with people outside of a Christian upbringing, we'll all agree they don't have the same frame of reference as we do. And even if they did, maybe they start to challenge those things and ask questions because it wasn't, maybe they didn't have the answers or the right foundation for their belief. If we happen to grow up in a Christian family or Christian background, we just accept the things that we believe and that we're taught. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but very often we can't give a real reason for why we believe what we believe. And that's where we hit some troubled waters, okay? Because at some point, we've probably wondered whether what we've been taught is true or not, or why we've at least accepted it as true. Especially if someone asks a question, why do you believe what you believe? I just believe that, I just know that I know that I know is not a good enough answer. And that's sometimes the best answer many of us would be able to give. I'm sure that you've at some point been challenged with some questions or maybe you've even asked yourself some questions about Christianity and the Bible. We're going to explore some of these kind of topics and get into them, because I believe it is so vital that we're able to give answers for what and why we believe. Okay. How do I know that Jesus rose from the dead? I just believe it in my heart. That's great, but it's not a good enough answer for somebody who's seeking. How do you believe that Father Christmas is Father Christmas? Atheists, non-believers kind of group it into the same category because it sounds like the same story, but it's not. How do I know that the Bible is true and it's not filled up with errors, or that it's made up ideas because from individuals? I mean, it's written by people after all. How do I know that God really exists? These are all common questions that people ask of the Christian faith, and they've asked it for years and they'll continue to ask it. And the tragedy is that they often come to Christians for answers, and Christians cannot give suitable answers. These are foundations that we need to have established in us. We so excitedly want to talk about the true nature of God, or healing, or grace. Rightfully so, those are exciting. But before someone can accept what the true nature of God is, they need to accept that God is. So, so often we, like many Bible colleges, are equipping people to be able to reach people who believe in Christ already. They're not equipping them to reach people who have no frame reference for religion or Christianity. It was when we were in the United States and New York City during lockdown, and we were interacting with people on the streets, and we were trying to minister and all that. And I realized, even Grace Life Ministry School at that time, that's when we made a major change in the curriculum. But at that time, we were not equipping people for ministry in the real world. We were only equipping people for ministry in the church to people who are like us. And that's what a lot of ministry schools are doing. We need to be able to connect with and minister to unbelievers. And in order for that to happen, there's certain questions which we have to have answered even for ourselves. So, let me get back to my slides here. So we're talking about apologetics for the first part of this course. The first part of this course, we're talking about apologetics, which comes from the Greek word apologia, which means a verbal defense. Okay, it's used 8 times in the New Testament. Acts 22 verse 1, 25 verse 16, and 1 Corinthians. You can see all the references there. So this word is used in the Bible on numerous occasions. And we're going to specifically look at that last quotation from 1 Peter 1 3 verse 15, sorry, which says, just trying to find my mouse here. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. Okay, so we need to be able to give an account, give an answer, some translations say, for the hope that we have. And we don't give an answer in a prideful arrogance and aggression. We give it with gentleness and reverence. So it's not just about having the right answers. It's about sharing things in love. Yeah, I've often even had unbelievers or Christians who are seeking ask me specific questions about God or the Bible. And I don't answer those questions for the simple reason that the answer is going to be too harsh right now. And so I realize I need to answer the individual, not answer the question, which means I'm looking at what is the real issue here before we get to the truth of their answer. We need to be wise in the way we deal with people. But there it says we need to be ready to make a defense. That word defense is apologia, where we get the word apologetics. And apologetics is the work of convincing people to change their views. Therefore, Christian apologetics is about answering any and all critics who oppose or question the revelation of God in Christ and in the Bible. And it's amazing because, this apologetics can really be expressed in many different subjects, in biblical manuscripts transmission, in biology, philosophy, mathematics, and science, logic. God can be revealed in all of those spheres and more, okay? But it can also consist of simply giving an answer to someone that has a question about God or the Bible or Jesus in the Bible. And so it's apologetics is a really huge, wide range of different topics, and we could never cover it in just a few sessions. But as I was reflecting on this, I realized how amazing it is that God would reveal himself to us through so many different areas of life, through philosophy, through mathematics, through science, through logic, biology, history. The beauty of this is that there are so many different people with so many different interests working in so many different fields with different types of thinking, that God has made sure that he's revealing himself to everyone in everything. And that's what we're wanting to look at over the next couple of sessions together. The Lord has called every single Christian to be ready to make a defense of his or her faith. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to have a doctorate in theology or divinity or whatever. All you need to know is him. And you do need to get into the word. You do need to study out things like apologetics to know a few things. Okay, it's not enough just to know Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Because if you're wanting to be effective in witnessing to people, they'll expect more than that. I've realized the biggest problem in the church is ignorance. Ignorance causes deception, it causes bondage, and it prevents many people from coming to truth or even sharing the truth, because we just don't know something. People don't need another good sermon on the true nature of God or the love of Christ or on healing if there's something that's preventing them from embracing Jesus. Some people, what's preventing them from embracing Jesus isn't their understanding of God's true nature, but maybe, how do I really know that Jesus rose from the dead? Or, I don't understand how you guys can believe the Bible because it was written by men. Those are some of the answers we need to be able to give before we even get into how Jesus' nature is to heal. I made a decision to receive Christ when I was about 5 years old, and it was a genuine decision, resulted in fruitfulness in my life, I believe. And I remember a time when I was in school, when I was younger, when people would be asking questions about Christianity and God, and I would resist those questions, not want to ask those questions, not want to explore those questions, because I was insecure and I thought they would shake my faith. But as I grew, as I became more mature, I got answers. And so I realized I can question certain things. And now I'm at the place where I know that anything that is solid can be questioned and investigated, and it should not be shaken. If it can be shaken, it should be shaken. Many Christians are shaken in their faith because they're not established in the truth. And through this Discover webinar, I'm wanting to help you get this established in truth. And it's a place where I want you to feel free to ask questions. So that's why we've got the Q&A section. And I want to encourage you to ask questions and send me questions if you have and you don't want to put it there, because we want to try and get to those questions and answer as many of them as possible. Okay. Let's go back here quickly. We're going to watch a quick video.
Okay, well, let's look at what do you feel is the strongest argument supporting the existence of God? Well, strong for whom? That's an important question. If somebody's coming to me broken-hearted because they've just lost a relative through illness, there's no point in saying, my dear, just look at the fine-tuning of nature. I mean that seriously. I was asked by an atheist professor of philosophy at Oxford to address his students, who he told me were all atheists like him. And he said, we're going to grill you, but I hope you're going to use your strongest argument. Well, I said, if you know what my strongest argument is going to be, you'd better give it to me. So he said, if I'm ever to become a Christian, the argument that would convince me most is fine-tuning. It's strong for some people. Other people don't care sixpence about it. They're not interested in it. They don't understand its power and its force, which is great. People need all kinds of different arguments. Some need an intellectual argument because they're bothered. There's something they don't understand, and they need facts. For example, somebody's bothered about the existence of Jesus. That's very simply dealt with. All you have to do is read a bit of ancient history. Other people are bothered because they are immersed in various aspects of the problem of evil and pain. And you don't deal with that by discussing Genesis 1. Now, I mean that quite seriously. One of the questions here, which I might as well deal with as we're going through, is what's the hardest argument you face? Well, the answer to that's obvious. It's the problem of evil and pain. That is the hardest question any of us face. And we need to think about it, because if we've nothing to say about it, we're as bad as the atheists. They have, by definition, nothing to say. Because atheism is a hopeless philosophy. By definition, there is no ultimate hope. And that's why the Bible talks about it. At the heart of our Christianity is not a set of physical laws, there's a cross. And that is answering a big question. It's telling us at the very least that God didn't remain distant from the problem of suffering, but himself has become part of it. That's a very different kind of answer than arguments from nature or the philosophy of science. So there are all kinds of things. It depends who's asking the question. And we need to be sensitive. You see, sometimes, very often I find, you don't answer the question, you answer the questioner. You try to find out where they're coming from, where they're hurting, what the problem is. I never forget first learning this at Cambridge, in college, at dinner. They used to provoke me, of course, because they liked mocking my Irish Christianity. And one night, a chap, but he was a very big chap, as far as I remember, and a Christian had asked me to explain why I believed in the resurrection. I was trying to keep my voice down, but of course, the lower I put my voice, the quieter the table became. And suddenly a student thumped the table, all the spoons and forks jumped, and he said, "That's the most preposterous nonsense I've ever heard. How can you believe that rubbish?" So I turned around and said, "Well," I said, "you feel really strongly about this." He said, "I do." I said, "Tell me, what did you make of Paul's evidence when you read it?" He said, "What?" I said, "Well, I presume you feel strongly because you've got an evidence base." "Well, did Paul talk about it?" I said, "Come round for coffee." So half an hour later, he said to me, "Do you know, my parents shoved this stuff down my throat, and I don't want it." Now I said, "That's the first honest thing you've said to me tonight." Half an hour later, became a Christian. And he has served the Lord for the last 50 years. You see, I got to the real issue. His anger was an outburst against his parents. It had nothing to do with intellectual arguments. So I'm trying to help you see that this question has no single argument.
So there you go. a great video from John Lennox, and we'll be seeing a couple more coming up. Just trying to see how to get out of it. So it's answering the question, why should I believe that God exists? Why should I believe that God exists? You know, this is a question that a lot of people ask in a more Christian environment like South Africa, you know, where there's maybe more people who grew up religious. It's not such a important question. You know, you go minister on the streets of Zimbabwe or in the bush somewhere in Africa, you don't need to confront people on the issue of why they should believe that God exists. Okay. But it's an important question when you're reaching the what we would call the post-Christian environment, where people have kind of think they've gone beyond Christianity. They were Christian and they're no longer. Most of Europe is post-Christian. And so, you know, that they kind of look back at history and they see that Christianity was this archaic movement that caused a lot of problems and caused a lot of division. And now we've progressed past that. Why should we believe what they believed? And obviously there's a discrepancy between what we believe as Christians now here and what a lot of them believed, not all of them back then, but the famous ones maybe. And, you know, so we need to be able to give them a reason for why they should believe in the existence of God. And often this is our problem. We need to be able to give an explanation without using the Bible. We need to not start off in the Bible. Okay? It's really an important point. We need to be able to explain to people why they should believe without using the Bible. But we'll get on to proof for the Bible and reliability of the Bible next week. But why should I believe that God exists? You know, most people will say you just have to have faith. And that's not really a good answer for thinkers, for people who are genuinely seeking and wanting answers. You know, many people from different religions, including Christianity, believe in a God, but they wouldn't be able to give you concrete reasons for why they believe. You know, what I love what John was sharing there is, you know, how we answer the individual is based on who's asking the question. So, you know, I went through an article where there were like 30 something reasons for the existence of God. And I was planning to go through it all with you. We might get into some of it, but I just realized like it's a bit laborious and we're not going to get time to get into all of it. And it's not all 100% necessary. We need to go and do that due diligence to study it out, but we can kind of just touch a few topics, and then we you know, when we encounter people, we know what their bent is, what they're interested in, and what their questions are, so we can study it out and meet them where they're at. You know, how we answer people's questions depends on who's asking the question. So, you know, we need more evidence than what most well-intending Christians have to offer. You know, some people would passionately state their case that they just know that they know that they know, and that God exists, and people can argue that. You know, they would argue that they have a personal relationship with Him. You know, that would have been my argument very often. But other than some feelings or a few personal experiences, we don't really have much evidence. We don't have much to offer people in answering this question, why should I believe that God exists? The God of the Bible has made Himself obvious to anyone who is truly seeking Him. This is really really good. The God of the Bible has made Himself obvious to anyone who is truly seeking Him. Okay, the Bible says that there are people who have seen sufficient evidence for the existence of God, but have rejected it. Romans chapter 1, verse 19 to 21. Okay, so there is sufficient evidence in creation for the existence of God. that we can get into and we can show people and all of that. But here's the important question with that. If you're not a believer yet, if you, or if the people we're presenting to were presented with sufficient evidence, would you accept what the evidence points to? Because some people are seeking, but they're not truly wanting to find answers for whatever reason. But if there are answers to the questions that people have, they need to be willing to take the answers that they are as truth and that they were wrong. You know, Jesus said that if we seek, we will find. Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. And God has revealed himself to us in nature, in science, in philosophy, in history, and throughout the Bible. And anybody who really wants to know, anybody who's seeking, will find him. In Jeremiah 29, verse 13 and 14, he says, you will seek me and find me when you seek for me with all your heart. I will be found by you. I love the testimonies of how atheists would go out to disprove God, disprove the resurrection, disprove Jesus. And so they go and they study full out to be able to give evidence that it never happened. And what happens? They end up becoming believers very often. It just shows you, if you truly seek, if you do due diligence, there are answers. A lot of people have questions, and the questions are just kind of like things that are out in the air, things that they have in the back of their mind, but they're not things that they ever actually seek answers for. They might ask a few people, but maybe they're even asking the wrong people. Okay, but there's a lot of resources out there on the internet and in libraries and in bookshops and with evidence in it pointing to or giving answers to the questions that we have. We're not the first people to ask questions, and other people who ask us questions are not the first people to ask those questions. But when answers come, if the evidence exists, we need to we need to be willing to accept it. If God exists, and we prove to people, we show them the evidence, they need to decide for themselves, okay, not do I reject the evidence, because then you're a fool, but do I accept or reject God based on the evidence? The reason the question of God's existence is so important is due to the implications of two possible answers. Number one, if the answer is God does not exist, then humanity is merely the result of random series of chance mutations, and therefore we have no obligation to live according to any objective moral parameters. And in addition to this, without the existence of a creator, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, there's no intrinsic human value, there's nothing like that. And so if there is no God, then life has no higher purpose, no higher value, no higher meaning than to just exist for a short space of time before disappearing. But if the answer is yes, there is a God, God does exist, then humanity has to behold their creator, and we are responsible to moral laws. We are that would be given to us. And this, however, is one of the reasons why many people would reject God's existence, because they do not want to change. They want to rather just live as they want to live. In London a few years back, there was a citywide campaign where on buses they had, I should have looked for a picture of it, but they had the message that said, there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. That was the message that they were advertising on the buses. There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. This is the sentiment the sentiment of this nature carries grave consequences, and brings us to the verse in Psalm 14 verse 1, which says, the fool says in their heart, there is no God. But it shows you, like that's, if there is no God, then do what you want, live as you want. So, that's the danger of it. Now, I'll send out the the notes of this tomorrow with an email that you'll get automatically. But just looking at a few things with regards to scientific arguments for God's existence. We're just going to look through a couple of them. The first one, as John mentioned there, is a fine-tuning argument. Scientists have determined that life in the universe would be impossible if more than 24 properties of the universe were even slightly different from what they are. In short, the universe is fine-tuned for life. It's perfect. And if it's perfect, then that points to a creator. Okay, that's the reasoning there. Let's look at another one. The Earth's perfect size. The Earth is the only known planet with an atmosphere of the right mixture of gases to sustain plant, animal, and human life. These are just, as people ask questions, does God exist? These are some of the thoughts that we can bring up with them without even going to the Bible. Before we must go to the Bible to preach the gospel. But before we get to the gospel, sometimes we need to get into things like this. Okay, let me look at another one here, number 4. DNA's function as life's blueprint. DNA instructs the cell like your smartphone is programmed. DNA is a 3 billion lettered program telling the cell to act in a certain way. It is a full instruction manual for life. I mean, if you look at how we're created, if you look at how creation is created, it's phenomenal. I mean, look at this. The human brain's capacity. The human brain processes more than 1 million messages a second. Your brain weighs the importance of the data and allows you to focus and operate effectively in your world. Look at this one, the eye's complexity. Think about the wonder of our bodies. The human eye has automatic focusing and handles an astounding 1.5 million messages simultaneously. I can hear my wife saying, that's why she's so tired. In addition, it can distinguish between 7 million colors, making it a highly complex organ. Aren't we fearfully and wonderfully made? Isn't this I've got a whole list of things like this, which just points to how awesome creation is, and we're included in creation. And if we can know these things and present these things to people in a loving way, as they ask relevant questions, we give relevant answers, it can help people get closer to God. Amen. So let me just find this other video here. One more video for us to watch, and then we're going to go into a time of Q&A. And so please get ready for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I believe in God. I believe in the supernatural God who created the heavens and the earth. I believe in a God who holds the heavens and the earth in existence. I believe that on the basis of rational evidence, similar to the beliefs held by the founders of this house, who gave this university the motto, Dominus Illuminatio Mea. They saw no contradiction between faith in God and the utmost excellence in rational inquiry. And if I dare mention my alma mater of Cambridge in this holy place, I would remind you that on the door of the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge are written the words, "Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them." And as we look at the rise of science in the 16th and 17th centuries, Alfred North Whitehead and many others commented that men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian, because arguably Christianity gave me my subject. What I am amazed at is that serious thinkers today continue to ask us to choose between God and science. That's like asking people to choose between Henry Ford and engineering as an explanation of the motor car. When Newton discovered his law of gravity, he didn't say, I've got a law, I don't need God. No, he wrote the Principia Mathematica, arguably the greatest work in the whole history of science, because he saw that God is not the same kind of explanation as a scientific explanation. God doesn't compete. Agency does not compete with mechanism and law. Why is there something rather than nothing? Alan Sandage, the brilliant cosmologist who became a Christian in his 50s, said God is the answer to that question. But people are now so desperate to show that the universe created itself from nothing, which seems to me to be an immediate oxymoron. If I say X created Y, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of Y. If I say X created X, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of X, which simply shows that nonsense remains nonsense even if high-powered scientists utter it. It reminds me a little bit of G.K. Chesterton, who said, "It is absurd to complain that it is unthinkable for an unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then to pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything." The heavens declare the glory of God, says the ancient psalm. And we've unraveled a bit of that, seeing the fine-tuning of the fundamental forces of nature. It's something that's so striking to scientists that it demands explanation. And it seems to me that Arno Penzias hit it right. He is the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the microwave background on which a lot of the evidence for the Big Bang is based. He said astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. But I want to come to what I think is one of the fundamental arguments for theism. I take it this house believes in reason. That's why we're all here. And as a scientist, I believe that the universe is rationally intelligible. That is something that has struck some of the geniuses of science as demanding an explanation. Einstein said the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And Wigner talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. How is it that a mathematician thinking in her head in here can come up with equations that seem to fit the universe out there? Well, how is it indeed? Because the irony of the atheist position here is evident. My atheist friends, and I have many of them, tell me that the driving force of evolution, which eventually produced our human cognitive faculties, reason included, was not primarily concerned with truth at all, but with survival. And we all know, ladies and gentlemen, what has often happened and still happens to truth when individuals or commercial enterprises or nations feel themselves threatened and struggle for survival. A leading philosopher, Alvin Plantinga of Notre Dame, says if atheists are right that we are the product of mindless, unguided natural processes, then they have given us strong reason to doubt the reliability of human cognitive faculties, and therefore inevitably to doubt the validity of any belief that they produce, including their atheism. Their biology and their belief in naturalism would therefore appear to be at war with each other in a conflict that has nothing at all to do with God. Yet my atheist friends still insist that it is rational for them to believe that the evolution of human reason was not directed for the purpose of discovering truth. And yet it is irrational for me to believe that human reason was designed and created by God to enable us to understand and believe the truth. Curious logic. By contrast with that, biblical theism asserts that ultimate reality is personal and intelligent, and the reason science works, and this was the motivating force that drove the great pioneers of science, is that the universe out there and the human mind in here that does the science are ultimately the product of the same intelligent divine mind. Human beings are made, we are told, in God's image, and that means that science can be done. That makes infinitely more sense to me as a scientist than atheism does. Now let me come briefly to ethics. Ethical behavior, like rational behavior, of course, does not itself require religious belief. This is consistent with the fact that humans are created in God's image as rational moral persons. But just as I suggest that rationality cannot be explained without the existence of God, so I dare to suggest that the existence of morality cannot be explained either. As modern science sprang from Judeo-Christian sources, so did the concept of human equality. Listen to atheist Jürgen Habermas, arguably one of Germany's leading intellectuals. He said that universalistic egalitarianism, from which sprang the ideals of freedom and a collective life and solidarity, the individual morality of conscience, human rights and democracy, is the direct legacy of the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love. This legacy, substantially unchanged, has been the object of continual critical appropriation and reinterpretation. To this day, there's no alternative to it. Everything else is just idle postmodern talk. And it seems to me he's hitting the core of something important, because the value of a human being on which such egalitarianism rests is based not on what the human being can do, but what she's made of, or how she's made in God's image. I never forget speaking on one of my many visits to Russia to a colleague in the Academy of Sciences. And he said, "You know, John, we thought we could abolish God and retain a value for human beings. We found we couldn't, and we murdered millions of them." And Alexander Solzhenitsyn has said, "If I'm asked, why is it that 60 million of my fellow countrymen were sacrificed?" He said, "The answer is, we have forgotten God." Science, of course, marvelous as it is limited. Even a Nobel Prize winner, by analyzing a cake, cannot tell why it was made. But Aunt Matilda, who made it, can tell you. She can reveal it to you. But if she doesn't reveal it to you, you'll never know. And that brings me to my next evidence. It's the same with the universe. We can analyze it magnificently, but ultimately, if it has a maker, and I believe it has, only he can tell us what it's all about. And he's done so in the powerful narrative of the Bible, in particular in its analysis of the problem with humanity, not simply in terms of behavioral breakdown between people, but a vertical breakdown of trust between us and the Creator. The unique solution to that problem is not simply in terms of human ethical development, although that's very important, but in terms of something far deeper altogether. The restoration of the fractured relationship with God through the salvation he has brought through Jesus Christ. A radical relationship that empowers us to live ethically from God. And here we reach what for me is the chief evidence, not only for the existence but the nature of God. It is Jesus Christ. He it was who not only taught the golden rule but embodied it, fed the hungry, healed the sick and suffering, and welcomed society's outcasts, brought honor and respect to the marginalized and ashamed. And he's brought forgiveness and peace to multi-millions around the world. He's able to do this, of course, because though he was a man, he uniquely never was only a man, but God become human. The central evidence for this startling claim is, of course, his historical resurrection from the dead that launched Christianity in the world. This is, of course, ladies and gentlemen, a crunch issue. If Jesus rose from the dead, death is not the end and atheism is false. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, Christianity is false. And I remember at Cambridge as a student listening to the brilliant Sir Norman Anderson, a legal expert, going through forensically the evidence from his legal perspective as a brilliant lawyer. And he said at the end of it, "The empty tomb then of Jesus forms a veritable rock on which all rationalistic theories of the resurrection dash themselves in vain." Just finally now, as I read the Bible, I do not only find intellectual satisfaction, but I find a great deal of that. I sense the voice of God speaking to me. You say, that's intensely personal. But ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked tonight about belief in God. And I want to strongly emphasize that God is not a theory, he's a person. And if the origination of me qua person is a personal God, then the most exciting thing really is there a possibility of getting to know God? And so I don't simply believe there is a God. I've come to know him and trust him. And I have strong reasons for doing so, because of Christ dying and rising again for me. And that has generated in me a sense of utterly unmerited forgiveness, acceptance, and peace. That has enabled me to face the ugly side of my own nature, and with God's help to do something about it. But it's enabled me to face something else. The hardest problem I face as a Christian is the problem of evil and pain. My niece getting a tumor at 22 that kills her. What do I say to my sister? And this is the hardest problem we face. But it seems to me that atheism here has no answer, because by definition, atheism believes that human death is the end, so there is no ultimate hope. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, we could stay here till midnight and beyond arguing, as has been done in this university for centuries, what a good God should, might, would, could, if not, possibly might, just could he not have done, and we'll get nowhere. So it seems to me there's another question we can ask, and it's this. Granted that life presents us with a double picture. We see some beautiful things. We see some ragged edges. We see hurt and pain, and we see joy. How can we come to terms with that? And it seems to me here is no simplistic answer, but a window into an answer, and it's this. If it is actually true that Jesus is, as I believe him to be, the Son of God, then we can ask the question, what is God doing on a cross? And the answer comes back at the very least. God has not remained distant from our human suffering, but has become part of it. And the other side of that is this. Because Jesus rose from the dead, he is going to be the ultimate judge. Now here's an irony, because atheism has no ultimate hope of justice by definition. The vast majority of people in the history of the world have died without justice and will die without justice. And if death is the end, then of course they have no hope of ultimate justice. But the promise in the New Testament, guaranteed by the resurrection of Jesus, is that he is to be the judge in the coming day. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the reasons why I believe that God is real and worthy to be trusted. Thank you.
So there you have it. I thought that would be a great way just to finish off. I'm going to look at some of the questions here. If you want, you can also just type there something that maybe just stood out for you in the chat section. We will definitely be looking at the case for the resurrection in another episode or another session. And I just wanted to read the quote that he gave there, because I thought that was great. What I loved there was, in dealing with people who don't believe the existence of God, we can give rational evidence, or we need to consider the fact that there's rational evidence. And what he means by that is looking at creation. Now, this is all he's a professor at Oxford University, so he's got some flowery language there that might be a bit challenging for us to understand. But I encourage you to try and dig into it, because there's some really great truths which he's saying. I love how he quoted G.K. Chesterton saying, "Nobody can imagine how nothing could turn into something. Nobody can get an inch nearer to it by explaining how something could turn into something else." It is really far more logical to start by saying, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, even if you only mean in the beginning, some unthinkable power began some unthinkable process. For God is, by its nature, a name of mystery, and nobody could ever suppose that a man could imagine how a world was created any more than he could create one. By evolution really is, but evolution is really mistaken for explanation. It has the fatal quality of leaving on many minds the impression that they do not understand it and everything else. And I'll even add that nothing matters. I like what you're saying there, Greta. Atheists have no hope of ultimate justice. I mean, where's it going? And I mean, we don't attack the atheist. We need to help them and explain to them and dig into these things and provide answers for them. But we can easily challenge their thinking if we go and study things out. Rita says what stood out for her was what John Lennox quoted a lot of scientists and other well-known respected persons who testified to faith in God and gave reasons for their faith. As you said, and not a single Bible verse was quoted. And you know me, I love the Bible, and I know Rita loves the Bible, but it's so important for us to recognize that if we're wanting to give reasons to people for why God exists, we can't always just go to the Bible. Okay, there are answers out there. You can go to a website called bethinking.org, and you can choose beginner, intermediate, advanced level. It's bethinking.org, and you can get a whole bunch of apologetics available there for free. And it's stuff that you can, whatever question you've got. Some of the things I might have a differing opinion on, but majority of it is really good. And here's the thing: we just need to go and study it out. We just need to go and look at the answers, and we'll provide some of those answers in our time together over the next couple of weeks. We are going to look at next week, the evidence for the reliability of the Bible, and we're going to be looking at how we can trust the Bible. And the reason why that is so vital is that if the Bible can be proven to be reliable and accurate, then we need to consider what the Bible says. Okay, and then we're going to be looking at the case for the resurrection. And if there's evidence outside of the Bible for the resurrection of Christ from the dead, then we have to consider what Jesus says, and we have to take what he says as truth, because, you know, he prophesied that he would die and he rose from the dead. So then, you know, that's worth listening to. And if all of these things, all of these facts that we give and all this evidence that we give shows that, hey, there is truth that is truth, and it's not your truth, my truth, whose truth. There's absolute truth that we need to believe in. Then what that kind of gets to is I might be wrong on some issues, and I need to adjust what I'm choosing to believe and believe what God is saying in his word. But we can't expect people to believe God's word if they don't believe that the Bible is reliable, if the Bible is even God's word. So that's why we need to start off at that basic before we get into some other topics. Just looking through the questions here quickly. Someone said what stood out for them was the cake analogy, comparing to the earth and why it was created. Loved the fact that he didn't just believe, but he trusts God. Someone asks, why should we not prove the existence of God utilizing the Bible but science? That's simply because some people don't believe the Bible. And so, you know, you can't meet that. You have to meet people where they're at. So use science because God reveals himself in science. You can use history. You can use mathematics. There's a whole lot of things if you go and study it out as to why we can, how we can help people see God, whether it's creation, biology, whatever. Okay. So that was, how do we go about understanding why Christianity is the chosen religion? Likely covered in later sessions. Definitely. We will certainly get into the question of why is Christianity right and everyone else wrong. We'll get into that. I think that is a very good and important question we have to consider. Okay, great. So we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.